Hey, Paulo. Good morning.
Morning, Christian. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Welcome to SportWorks Talks. To everybody online, welcome as well. Great to see you. You're in southern Portugal this morning.
I am in the Algarve, enjoying my self-isolation because of this whole coronavirus.
Indeed, indeed. And what's it like down in the Algarve today?
Today it's actually quite nice. I mean, we've had some rain last week, but this week's been warm and nice. So we're looking forward to enjoying a little bit sport and just being here and working from home as everyone, I guess.
Yeah. Well, same here in Lausanne. We're
Yeah.
back to it's we're slowly getting back to it. I think people are slowly, it's a very gradual approach. But this week, a few people have gone back to the office and easing back into what is perhaps the new norm. So
Exactly.
so I want to say good morning to everybody who's joining online. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you with us. As we've often done, if you've joined any of our webinars before, we're going to give a 20-minute presentation. Paolo's going to give a presentation this morning looking at the challenges we face in cost revenue models of sport going ahead post-COVID. This is going to be a little bit interactive. So Paolo's going to do a presentation, and at the end we will open it up to question and answers. What I'd ask is that if you put your questions into the chat, we'll tag them as we go through, and then we'll hope to answer those as best we can, or Paolo will, and as best we can at the end of the presentation. So we'll do about 20 minutes, and then we'll go into the live chat. And also, if you've got any questions, we can post them if we don't get to all of them at the end. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Paulo. Good morning, and enjoy SportWorks Talks.
Thank you very much, Christian, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us. I know it's probably late in some parts of the world, very early in others, but I appreciate the effort, especially in a context where we have so many webinars ongoing. So it's great to have you here, and hopefully we'll make it interesting. I mean, as Christian already introduced, the idea is to talk about a little bit the impacts that this coronavirus may have on sports sponsorship and revenue generation models. Obviously, this is an open discussion. We will try to foresee a little bit what could be the future. So please ask your questions away, give out your opinions, because I think at the end of the day, it's useful for everyone to learn from each other. So Christian, if we could just start the presentation. Thank you. So again, as I told you guys, this is about the future of sports in a post-COVID context. Let's put it this way. I'll go through the presentation very quickly, trying to respect the 20 minutes. So the agenda for today, firstly, I will speak about what is the structure currently. So what is the sports revenue structure currently? I think this is something that will be very familiar to a lot of you. Just trying to introduce then the financial impact of the virus on sports stakeholders. And again, I will separate between rights holders and for you guys at home, rights holders for me, as I will be talking through them, about them through the presentation. I mean, the federations or the event organizers, etc. And then I will focus as well on the commercial partners, so both on the sponsors and the broadcasters. We'll do just a couple of slides on the trends during the pandemic. So what has been done by these rights holders and commercial partners lately during these last, I would say, 2 to 3 months to try to be ahead of the curve. They've tried to innovate in some ways, and we'll go through that very quickly. And then probably the most interesting part for everyone, so the possible solutions for the future. And again, the two models that I will try to present and introduce to you guys are based on obviously my own thoughts, the discussions I've had with my clients or my potential partners, some of my network, but by no means they are not debatable. So it would be very, very interesting also to hear your opinions on what you think about them and what could happen in your opinion again. So the revenue structure pre-COVID. So I mean, although it slightly different situations, sponsors may activate their sponsorship respectively of an event. The truth is that everything is based on an event model. So the broadcast revenue comes out of, naturally, the broadcast of the event. So when we have no event because it was canceled or because it was postponed, there is absolutely no broadcast cash. Ticketing and merchandise, again, this is, again, related to the event. And this is very important, and you'll see throughout the presentation how most rights holders are today basing their revenue models around events. So again, ticketing and merchandise, if you have no world champs and you can not sell any tickets, it's very, very unlikely that you actually will sell any merchandise around it. For your information, most of the merchandise these days are sold within an event context, either on official stores or licensing stores, etc. And then obviously, again, sponsorship. Sponsorship is slightly different. Sponsors do activate a little bit before and after an event, but again, they'll use the event as the main landmark for their partnership. Again, there is obviously hospitality rights that they get. There's supply of products or tickets, but it's all about the activation around the event. So these are interesting figures. I don't know if you know Two Circles. Two Circles is a company that is owned by WPP, and they've done a research called the Sports Attention Index. This was done a couple of weeks ago. It was published at least a couple of weeks ago, where they've concluded that there were supposed to be 49,000 major sports events with a gate of more than 5,000 paying spectators expected to take place this year. And interestingly enough, out of those, there will be roughly 5,500 to take place in March, and only 33% went ahead. And their estimation is actually only 53% of originally scheduled events will actually happen in 2020. So this is almost half of them being either canceled or postponed. And we know out of those, there are obviously the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. We have the Euro 2020, the Copa America, the Wimbledon Championships. There is the Golf British Open, the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix. So all prime events that were either canceled or postponed. Interesting enough, what is the result and the impact of these cancellations financially? So still, according to Two Circles, there was a projection, again, this is projection, but it was quite projection based on contracts of sales of media and sponsorship rights of roughly $135 billion. And the projection still in the estimation, and this number would go down to $73 billion. So almost half would be lost only by these cancellations and postponements of the events. And this shows you quite clearly the importance of sports revenue, of events in sports revenue. Moving forward, I will try to explain one by one now the impact on the several stakeholders, and I will start by the rights holders. Again, by rights holders, I mean the federations and the leagues. The first impact that we are seeing currently is undoubtedly an unexpected increase in operational costs. To take the example of the Olympics, think of the Athletes Village. So the Athletes Village was supposed to be the Athletes Village in July and August this year, and it would be turned into condos that would be privately sold starting from September this year. With the postponement of the games for next year, it means that the owners that had bought the condos would need to only move next year, meaning that the Tokyo Organizing Committee and the IOC would need to secure the Athletes Village for an extra year. Obviously, there is a cost associated to this. But think of other examples, venue securitization. Again, with the Olympics, different venues have different owners, some private, some state. Again, they'd had their plans for their venues for next year. Now they need to cancel those plans, and that comes again at a cost. When you think about the UEFA Euro 2020 being postponed for 2021 and using, again, venues such as Wembley or Amsterdam Arena, where they usually host concerts and other events, again, comes at a cost. But also think about staffing. Local organizing committees employ a lot of people with fixed-term contracts usually, ending at the end of the event. Once you postpone the event, there's an extra year of salaries. There are people who are being laid off. Obviously, there are people who would have other plans for next year that would need to be rehired. And if not, you need to, again, to train new people. So it represents a huge, huge operational hurdle that obviously costs a lot of money to surpass. The second item that I've put in this slide would be the international sports schedule calendars. What will happen is basically the lack of events of this year in a very tight sports schedule worldwide will obviously create an overlap of events for next year. So and again, here the bigger takes down the smaller. So once the IOC and UEFA decided to postpone their events for next year, you've seen kind of like a snowball of other smaller and regional continental events doing the same, just because they don't want to compete with such big events such as the Olympic Games or the UEFA Euro. But also think about qualifying events. For Tokyo 2020, once the decision was taken of postponing the games, there are still athletes to be qualified. Now it means that they will have to have those qualifying events again next year. So all of this, again, comes at a cost for the rights holder, a cost that was unexpected. The third point is the redistribution of revenue holders. And we've seen this week FIFA announcing that it would be helping its member associations. We've seen that the IOC is in the same situation where you have IFs that are almost fully depending on their IOC contribution. And all of these international federations, member associations, call it what you want, but they need the money today. They cannot wait for an extra year. So we're seeing these big continental structures needing to advance money to ensure the survival of some of the stakeholders that are basically relying on the events. The fourth point is obviously a loss of revenue for the future or cash flow for the present. The part of loss of revenue for the future relates more to the smaller budgets for investment in sports that the brands will have. Brands are now struggling to actually survive. If you look at the example of Airbnb, for instance, they are losing money every day, millions every day, just because people are not traveling and not using their Airbnb facilities. Funny enough, they just got into a long-term deal to become an IOC top partner and invested a lot of money into it. They announced that they would suspend all its marketing activities I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Last month, maybe. So again, it represents a big issue for them, and probably the board of directors is less keen on investment in extra activities such as sport marketing or activating around sports marketing. And if you pair this lesser willingness of brands on investing into sports with the need of the rights holder to distribute the revenue, you'll clearly have a gap. In terms of cash flow for the present, this is mostly related with broadcasters and their refusal to pay some of the fees without the possibility to simply broadcast the event. I mean, we've seen it happening in France with Canal Plus and being coming to the Ligue 1 and saying, listen, you're not having any games, so we can't show anything. So you're basically not delivering on your contract. So we're not going to pay. We're not going to pay because we're not going to pay for anything. So again, and this represents a problem for Ligue 1 and so forth. We've seen also a very interesting example on the sponsorship side with the Girondins de Bordeaux. So they had their main shirt sponsor called the Bistro Regent. It's basically a food and beverage company that had a clause in their contract saying that if in case of a pandemic they needed to close business, the contract would be null. So it's quite interesting. They've actually suspended their deal with Girondins de Bordeaux because of this. And then obviously for the future, it's very, very likely that the rights holders will all secure a pandemic insurance, because this has put so much of a burden into them that they will likely follow the example of the All England Lawn Tennis Club, the organizer of Wimbledon, that apparently is set for an estimated payout of around $140 million because precisely had pandemic insurance secured for the last 17 years. It's quite a unique situation, but it just shows that better be safe than sorry. So this was on the side of the rights holders. Moving on to the sponsors. There are several financial impacts here as well. Firstly, I want to talk about the sponsorship contractual terms. So sponsors of Tokyo 2020, for would have their contractual terms ending at the end of 2020, obviously post the event. With the event being postponed, there is a likelihood that their contracts or the term of their contract will also be postponed until end of next year. And that will create an issue because, to give you an example, the IOC has secured Allianz as a top partner in the insurance category, and Tokyo 2020 had and has still a couple of partners, domestic partners in the insurance category. In a normal situation, it wouldn't be represented probably because basically Allianz would succeed worldwide starting the year 2021. But with this postponement, it will mean that they will overlap within the same category. Obviously, this creates a problem and maybe very likely a financial impact for them. In terms of activation and budget reduce, and I've mentioned this briefly in the previous slide, naturally the brands are facing bigger issues, not just the sports issues, but bigger issues in terms of their own business and their own revenue in terms of business development. So again, it's very, very likely that the board of directors would go to their sports team or their sponsorship team at least and say, well, listen, you need to do less campaigns. It will be less impact on direct-to-consumer campaigns. You need to justify your investment in a more tighter way, the same way as they're doing with all the departments within the company, because it's difficult times that we're going through. So again, it's very, very likely that sponsors and sports sponsorship budgets will be impacted. The third point that I've included here would be the overlapping of events. Again, not necessarily sporting events, but also something like a music festival. I mean, you could have a brand that is simultaneously a sponsor of a club, of an event, but also a music festival, and they all got postponed for next year. And the brand had its calendar of sponsorship well defined for 2020, and now is facing an overload in 2021 that will necessarily have a financial impact. The fourth item is actually an interesting one as well for me, because it came out of a discussion I had with apparel brand, a shoe brand, when they said, well, listen, Paulo, we had forecasted the launch of a new shoe, a new sports shoe, just after Tokyo 2020, and now we won't do it anymore. But simply, they cannot postpone the launch of this new shoe by a year because they've produced thousands of them and they're ready to go to retail. So they'll postpone it a little bit, but not by a year. So basically, they will not take advantage of the fact that they are a sponsor of a sport events to launch a new product. So there is quite a bit of a financial broad impact on sponsors as well. And if we move on to broadcasters, I mean, this is the scheduling calendar. It's obviously very, very, very clear. Broadcasters live on a minute-by-minute schedule. Again, not just sports, but all their programming. And they had foreseen a very intense 2020 sports summer. And now they go from zero to an overload for next year, and they will need to reshuffle programming, reshuffle events that they will broadcast, which will obviously have a big financial impact on them. The second point is the simple fact that most of them do advance pay their rights fees, meaning that they've paid parts or partially at least of what they bought in terms of the rights to broadcast the event. And the fact that the event is canceled, they simply cannot broadcast anything. So they're going in now into archive streams. And yesterday here, and I turned on the sports TV channel and I was watching matches of 2002. Well, the good thing is most of them I don't remember, so it's always good to refresh your memory. But again, it's very, very hard to sit down and watch a full football match of 2002, even if it's your team. They are, again, depending on the events, to also calculate that return on investment. advertising and subscription refunds. This is an interesting one. I mean, we've had the news from NBC on the record figures of ad sales for Tokyo 2020. So they said that they had sold a worth of 1.25 billion US dollars. I think they said this in December last year. And now, obviously, with Tokyo not happening, the advertisement buyers will ask for refunds. On the subscription model, again, when you have pay-per-view or subscription models, you will have the consumers paying for determined content. And if that content simply doesn't exist, broadcasters are being put under pressure and forced into discounts for just being able to have some sort of customer retention. The fourth point is technology costs. So again, some broadcasters that wanted to innovate either with 4K or 8K offerings, virtual reality, immersive content, they made big investments into developing technology for it to be ready for this year. The fact that the event is canceled, obviously you would think, well, they could just do it next year. The problem is in technology, especially in broadcast technology, a year is a lot. So whatever is current and up to date this year will very, very likely be outdated in the summer of 2021, meaning that they will need to reinvest in research and development for the same technology an additional amount of money. Again, a financial impact that was certainly not foreseen by the research and development team in these broadcasters. But at the same time, there could be a positive financial impact here, and it's a pay-per-view opportunity. Think of the new norm of life, as Christian was saying, that we're living now. I mean, we're all being forced to stay at home, to have social distancing, to meet fewer people at the same time, to do not do cross-generational contact. Well, this will mean that if you think about someone like Real Madrid that usually has their stadium with 80,000 people, now those 80,000 spectators would be potentially 80,000 viewers on TV because the match could be played behind closed doors. And they can't even go and meet up in a bar because of social distancing. It's very likely that the bar will have limited capacity, meaning that for broadcasters, this is an opportunity for pay-per-view of additional customers that they wouldn't have if the stadium was full. So again, I mean, with all these impacts and negative kind of consequences of the virus, there are also some opportunities that could be exploited. So what were trends during the pandemic? And Christian, I am aware of the 20 minutes, so I'm not going to take a lot of time on this. So basically,
no problem. Carry on. Good presentation. Carry on.
Thank you. So some of the federations and rights holders actually developed some very interesting content, most of it based on virtual and esports, on do it at home, with a mix of pro elite athletes and direct-to-consumer activation where fans could join the elite athletes. I mean, we've seen it with motorsport, the Race at Home Challenge of Formula E. We've seen it with Formula One, the virtual esports series. Cycling did something very, very similar together with Zwift. Also snooker, and we've all seen as well the football, the FIFA 2020 stay and play series, where you have all these professional athletes playing against the professional gamers, and it's quite interesting. I mean, but again, or actually, the golf one is an interesting one where they have the match coming up between Mickelson and Woods versus Brady and Manning. So cross mixing sports. So here, golf and NFL, obviously. To do some sort of interesting activations. But again, I think this is very seasonal. Once live sports comes back, in my view at least, it's very, very likely that esports and the virtual gaming will still go down to at least number 2 in the desires of people. And so what's the future revenue model? I think pre-COVID and the current era, we've kind of understood, and I went through it in the beginning. I mean, sports rights holders have traditionally kept control over their events, potentially with some sort of local organizing committee being set up. But the idea is always keeping control over the sport and the event itself. From a commercial perspective, there were and there have been roughly 2 trends. So the first one being the rights holder drafting their own commercial packages and going and selling to third-party brands. So this is what happens mostly with the ones that have a more sophisticated team behind, or a better value proposition, so bigger events, let's say it this way, that are easier to sell. Some others that are a little bit more risk adverse, usually higher third parties or agencies would come and buy out all the rights for an anticipated fee. So the rights holder will have no risk. They know how much they're going to get, and they know it in advance. And these agencies actually resell and take the risk by reselling to brands, and then getting the profit from it. It's two interesting models, but in my view, it's models that are soon to be dead. Because why did I say that? I say that because more than ever right now, rights holders need to understand that they're not just competing with other sports. They're actually starting to compete with all sorts of entertainment. It's such a wide and broad offering that we've had these days. It's not just football competing against the Olympic, against the NBA, but you're also competing against the music festival. You're competing against movies. You're competing against people doing sports themselves. So again, it's a different context. And now more than ever, coming out of a financial crisis that is foreseen to be probably the biggest one of our century, the sponsors need to start justifying the return on investment to their boards. And it's not just an LED placement that will do it. They need to demonstrate that a sponsorship investment actually drives effective business results. That by the fact that I'm betting into associating myself with the Champions League, and I am Adidas, I will actually sell more footballs. I will actually sell more shoes. I will actually sell more clothes. And it's through the conversations I've been having, it's more and more of a need, because when I approach a brand and try to sell them the sponsorship in a really, really cool brand, they often come back to me and say, well, that's amazing. It's cool. I have all these opportunities of activating. I will be seen on TV. But I need to go to my board of directors and ask for those 5 million or 20 million and prove to them that it will actually bring me more than that in business, which is something that is very, very, very difficult. With that in mind, I mean, with the majority of sports around the world currently either on hold or actually canceled, it's very, very likely that there will be a need to rethink all the marketing strategies. I mean, the budgets will be cut as a result of this whole global health emergency, and again, it's a tight investment situation that we're living in. We need to be creative. And I found that very interesting. I read the European Sponsorship Association article last week, and the main message that was identified there for 2020 was the fact that we needed partnerships with purpose. Partnerships with purpose. So at the end of the middle of, I put 10 million and I get an LED and a marketing activation and some sort of brand association, right? But you need to actually mean something for the brand. So the rights holder will start to, there will start to be a need to be creative. Also very interesting. I read the interview on Jaime Jores, which is the CEO of MediaPro. MediaPro is a rights holder for Champions League in Spain, and obviously they do a lot of host broadcasting production as well. And he said last week that he believes that the broadcast rights spend has reached its maximum. So right now, it has to be up to the rights holders to find new ways of attracting investment. So what will they do? So, and again, this is debatable, and please feel free to jump in on this as we go. Christian will obviously collect all the questions. So either we keep the same model, and again, as explained, there's very likelihood of going through a period of investment, less budget for potential partners, and a decrease of revenue, or we enter into a fully collaborative ecosystem. An ecosystem in which sponsors and suppliers will actually become business partners of the rights holders. Rights holders will need to be creative and adapt more to the needs and objectives of the partners. And I have two models to share with you, and I mean, think about them, comment them. I have this is not the whole truth. I don't know if this is going to happen or not, because we're here in an exercise of foreseeing the future, but it's something that has come several times in my discussions with my clients and customers. So the first one is an equity model. So instead of being connected only through marketing rights, the rights holders, the partners, and potentially private investors would be connected through equity. The idea here is the following. So today we already have private investment coming into sports through mainly private equity funds or capital funds. We see it quite often in the clubs, in football clubs, where Citigroup is buying equity, where you have Bein and Qatar Sports Investment buying equity, where you have all these, we have the Glazer family buying United, etc. However, insofar the model of being involved in events, not in clubs, in events, is generally still through sponsorship. I probably would accept CVC Capital Partners that bought, a roughly 30% share and equity in the England Premier League rugby, and they were actually owners of Formula 1 until 2017. But again, partners want more. They want a say in the future of the event. They want to sit at a table with decision makers. They want to be able to adjust the rights and shape the event itself so that it matches their business objectives. They don't want anymore just a static set of marketing and hospitality rights, especially not for the same amount of money. So this is probably more likely for those the most impacted by COVID. So probably not for UEFA or FIFA, the IOC, who are still very, very prime events and would probably get still bids on the table for just the current traditional model. But for mid and smaller size events, this could be actually a good way forward. So the equity sharing model, it's not an equity sharing within the federation, because as you probably know, federations are usually not-for-profit organizations, but it's in relation to the specific event. It has been discussed going through a joint venture model with some sort of legal structure that would have the responsibility of delivering the most successful event possible, and where the right holder, the partners, and the broadcasters, or even private investments, would all contribute financially, so would all contribute for the budget, also with expertise and decision-making power to enhance the quality of the event itself. And at the end, obviously, a better event would raise more value, make the pie bigger, let's say this way, and the joint venture would then be responsible for the operational delivery, but also to centralizing all out of the event. Think about who knows the sports consumer better? Is it actually the rights holder? I don't think so. I think it's actually the sponsor and the broadcaster, because they are the ones who have the most direct-to-consumer interactions. So you actually may need them more than ever at the table to decide what would be the future of the event. There will be a big benefit for the rights holder, because at the beginning they'll have less operational costs, because these would be probably split with all the partners. They'll have less risk. At the same time, they would be able to bring expertise and add it to the table, while obviously keep control over the sport. For the sponsor and the broadcaster, it would probably mean less initial cash contribution and more value in kind, more in expertise, a little bit more control over the event, and the ability to shape it in a way that makes sense business-wise for them. Obviously, there will be a sharing of data, of customer relationship management, and all of that would make it easier to justify a sponsorship investment to their own board of directors. Very, very quickly, I thought about an example that I could give you for you to understand. So imagine that there would be an establishment of a legal structure, a joint venture to organize and deliver a beach volleyball World Champs finals. It would be called Beach Volleyball Finals SEA. FIVB would obviously be the rights holder, so they set up a model, an independent entity to deliver it. This entity would be, and the equity in it would be split between FIVB, Ganten and Mikasa are the sponsors, IMG, Dentsu, and NBC as broadcaster agencies. All of them would contribute financially to the entity, but also with their respective expertise. The cost of organizing the event would be split. The event manual would be draft and done in cooperation. Very, very likely, obviously, The sporting and regulation part would be the responsibility of the FIVB. But other parts of the manual event, like the marketing part, the ticketing part, the engagement strategies, or even the TV digital production, will be mostly on the part of the commercial partners and agencies that are the experts in those areas. It's very likely that the event will actually be better. It's very likely that it would attract more and raise revenues that would engage more. And again, that will be split by the venture members. Obviously, all of this would only work after a very, very thorough financial due diligence. And that, I said, it may not work for every federation and every event. But this financial due diligence would need to ensure that the balance between the split of costs, the extra revenue raised, the expertise brought to the table, and the dividends distribution ensures a better margin for all parties. Again, it's an interesting idea that I've heard more and more people talk about. The second hypothesis that I want to put forward for discussion is the licensing model. And for the licensing model, I want you to think of an example with me. Imagine a specific car brand that is looking to launching a new car model. When it's doing its exercise, it's considering, obviously, a global marketing campaign, including probably TV ad space, out-of-home banners and advertisement on highways and airports of the new car model, a launch event in the Geneva Motor Show, if it happens, getting to a couple of expertise automotive magazines, paying some newspaper ads, getting a couple of social media influencers to tweet about the new car and how great it is to drive it. And obviously, and simultaneously, it's thinking about getting deals with all the car retailers in the world to have the car available worldwide for people to buy. The brand would have a budget of $20 million for it. And this is the way it has always done business, and it's kind of worked so far. So now a new approach. The same car brands, the same car model, and the same 20 million budget. However, instead of doing this whole global marketing traditional campaign, the brand decides to approach FIBA, for example, that is planning on hosting its 2021 3-on-3 World Cup finals in Rome and is looking for partners and investment. It's actually pretty good, pretty suitable, because one of the brand's strategic market is precisely Italy. So the brand comes and approaches FIBA and proposes a full licensing of the event, meaning that the brand will organize it in full, respecting, obviously, the FIBA's rules and regulations for the sport, as well as any broadcast deals FIBA would have in place. So therefore, the brand is then awarded naming rights. So it would be called, Toyota 3-on-3 World Cup. It doesn't have to spend as much in global marketing campaign with TV ads and out-of-home banners, as it will just take advantage of the fact that the finals are broadcasted worldwide. So in that situation, they're already better than if they were just on Geneva Motor Show that is not broadcasted worldwide, at least live. The brand can also take advantage of the sports events to host corporate events, inviting its prime clients, but also its best car resellers, and therefore create business opportunities while all of them enjoy some sports. The brand will also take advantage of the athletes that will share and tweet the competition, and they will be leveraging on it. So the social media influencers actually become the athletes, as will FIBA, to be honest. And basically, they would just take advantage of the full sports buzz and media coverage to launch the new product. Instead of a global marketing campaign based on TV ads, it will be a global marketing campaign based on an event. And it's quite clear that as of today, the associated with an event and the power of sports will do the rest. Meaning that an association usually with a corporate brand is less effective than an association with an event. Just think, when you think about Heineken, you think about Heineken as a Champions League sponsor more than a UEFA corporate sponsor. Maybe when you think about P&G and you think about the Thank You Mom campaign that they do for all the games, you think of them as an Olympic Games partner, not that much of as an IOC partner. So the association with actually events is a quite powerful one. So that was it. The main message and idea from my presentations and discussions I've had is the following. Just to give you with that, I think at risk of not being able to compete with entertainment anymore, rights holders definitely need to revisit the current commercial models to engage with commercial partners, both from the media and the marketing side. They need definitely to bring them to the decision-making table on the event. They need to co-create partnerships with purpose beyond just the event activation. It is clear that we live in a context that is very event-reliant, and the impact of COVID is the proof. We need to move to the next stage, whereas a partner is a partner beyond an event. And for that to happen, that partnership needs to bring business results for the sponsor or the broadcaster. And Christian, that was it from my side.
Great presentation, Paulo. Thank you.
A bit longer.
Really. No, I think, I don't know about the rest of the audience, but for me, I was sitting nodding through most of, all through your presentation, in total agreement with a lot of what you've presented. Really appreciated the models at the end. I think it's important we do start to think, and it's great having people like yourself to start putting these ideas forward as to how we can evolve, because staying as we were perhaps isn't going to be the way forward. We need to adapt. I think we have that ability, I guess, which is important. So, great presentation, thank you. And I'm just noting that we've got quite a number of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to go and step through those. Let me just pull up. I'm going to go back to the very beginning. But yeah, great presentation. So I think this is very early on. Yash asked the question, what is the percentage distribution amongst each of the revenue models? I think that's going back to probably one of your earlier slides where you had the three different breakdowns, if you've got a take on that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the question. It really depends. There is not a one-size-fits-all, but it's very, very clear that broadcast and media still has a very predominant part of it. Sometimes it's 2/3, sometimes it's half, sometimes it's even a little bit more. So I would say for sure broadcast and media would have the majority of the chunk. Then sponsorship and commercial, and then obviously merchandising will be the lesser. But that is in the model of today, which that will be the future.
Yeah, it's a good question. The next question from Julian. So from a financial standpoint, what can we learn for the future from what is going on today? As you pointed out, it was widely publicized that Wimbledon had pandemic insurance in place for quite some time. Will we see more widespread adoption of such policies? I think certainly. But will rights holders be looking to be less dependent on events for the revenue? I think that gets back to your model.
I think so. I think that's exactly what I meant through my presentation. I think on the first question, obviously, I think it's a normal reaction. Once you get robbed, you put locks on the door. So now you've experienced pandemic. So for at least a few years or a few editions, we'll have rights holders securing broader insurances that will hopefully cover events like this. But again, the main idea and the main result we have from this is they're still very, very reliant on events. And they need to be creative. And again, it comes back to the partnership with purpose thought that I had. So they need to create programs. They need to create ways of associated. They need to meet the business necessities of the partners. They need to look into sustainability. They need to look into overlay and venue construction. They need to kind of create business opportunities for their partners, and they need to pick their partners in a smart way, not just who brings the most money and the most cash to the table, but the ones that actually match the needs and the vision of the federation.
Yeah, no, a really good point. I really like that phrase you come up with, partnerships with purpose. I think it does play a big part in the future. Having worked with tops for multiple games, I know how important it is to have that alignment. Having led the Panasonic project, the Amiga projects, I think they've got great relationships with the games in that they're also a delivery partner. So I see things where, as you're saying, having that purpose of delivery and having that alignment, and also offering a service as part of that sponsorship, I think will really play out in a different way, I think, in the going future.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to go to Alberto. So are you foreseeing litigation and arbitration? Like, how do you see that? I know you made a few points about already. There's some questions about contractual obligations. I guess that's the lead into that question.
Well, Yeah, well, hopefully not. I am a lawyer by trade, so I always kind of foresee litigation and arbitration, but hopefully not. Again, if we go into litigation and arbitration, it probably means that we've missed out on the partnership with purpose. It means that we, at least on the purpose part, because I would expect most of the partners to maybe adapt their contracts. Maybe there will be a discount for the future. Maybe there'll be less activation now. I mean, that could be efforts from the rights holders to, for example, keep branding. So Tokyo 2020 will be still called Tokyo 2020 and 2021. The Euro 2020, same thing. Why? Because they want that the activations that have happened so far keep meaning. So again, I think there are compromises that need to be done by both parties. But I don't think there are not a lot of examples on litigation where it comes to sponsorship or on sports broadcast. So I don't expect a lot of it.
Sure. It's good. I really like that strategy, and I think you're right. That partnership thing is key to that. Good question here. A tough question from Tim. Hi from London. Hi, Tim. Paulo, to what degree do you estimate that sports sponsorship rights may decrease?
Well, again, I think it will. Yeah, it's a tough question, but it makes sense. I think again, as Jaume from Media Pro said, I think we are close of reaching the max in terms of just the sports spending. I think now it will be coming more and more into a collaboration and how can we drive business up for brands as well. So if a right holder is able to demonstrate to a brand that by partnering with the rights holder, the brand will actually sell more, then I guess the rights fees will still go up. But I think it will be harder and harder to just justify investment on the basis of brand association. So for sure, in the next 2-3 years, just because world economy is going to be tight on investment, I think things will go down, but also the cost hopefully will go down. So the events will happen in a better way. But in the future, if we really move into this partnership with purpose and if we really move into this kind of like non-based model, I expect the curve will go back up because simply it will be very, very easy to justify to a board of directors to spend more money if I'm at the end of the story bringing more revenue.
Yeah, I think you hit on a good point there too. I mean, with the reduction in revenue, perhaps we'll definitely see the need to become more efficient in the delivery of the events. So hopefully that equation will start to balance out a little bit as well. So the cost of production, but certainly with certain elements of the delivery. So it's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to jump now to Max. Do you anticipate some sovereign wealth funds which purchase pro teams will seek to sell their stakes?
Sorry, some sovereign wealth funds, and then I lost you.
Yeah, so do you anticipate that some sovereign wealth funds which purchased pro teams will seek to sell their stakes? It's an interesting question.
It is, but I don't, to be honest. I don't think they're going to sell their teams just yet. I think right now we're entering into a phase where it's good for buyers and rich people, but not as good for sellers. So I would actually anticipate the opposite. I would anticipate that more sovereign wealth states want to get into teams. And we're seeing the example now with Newcastle, aren't we? With the private investment fund of Saudi trying to buy Newcastle, although, I mean, they'll hit some hurdles with the Premier League, but I anticipate a bigger investment now because they'll simply think things are cheaper because of the crisis.
Yeah. Okay, good perspective. I've got time for just a couple more questions. I hope we've run a little bit over time, but there's some great questions here, and I'm quite keen to keep going. We can go for another couple of minutes if you've got still.
If we can't answer everything, I'm happy to answer afterwards via email or something if they can drop me a line.
Great. Yeah, what we'll do, just for those know, that we will drop all these questions and answers onto the platform so you can actually catch up with them as well after the presentation. Okay. So we'll do a couple more. One here from Michelle. So let's assume that in the short term, people prefer to avoid the crowding of sporting events. Since most of the revenues come from broadcasting, in which proportions do you think the lack of spectators would jeopardize the revenues in these events? Wouldn't broadcasting, streaming, and OTT audience be enough to generate the revenue, including from sponsorship, etc.?
I think so. It's an interesting question. I think so for the bigger events, the ones that have broadcasting deals. My concern is mostly for the ones who cannot get broadcasting deals or are simply using TVs as a way of showing more of the sports to raise revenue for sponsors, giving more visibility for their sponsors. So when we think about that situation, we're probably thinking of football or NBA or the Olympics, which, to be honest, obviously it's a hit. The lack of spectators will be a hit more in terms of atmosphere and enjoyment of the sports rather than revenue. But all the other events, actually, all the other 10,000 events that are happening yearly that cannot secure multi-million deal broadcast revenue, then the lack of spectators is a big thing. Obviously, think about second league football. It's a big thing, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's also the key point, and it's often been asked, when you compare the revenue of ticketing versus the revenues of merchandising versus broadcast rights, yes, there is a big disparity. There's a big disparity, of course. There's not a number of tickets. However, you cannot undervalue the value of the spectators for the performance as well. And I think certainly for the games, I think that adds an element of to the events that we participate. So hopefully we'll see some creativity in finding ways that we can bring the live event spectators back to the stage. But no, great question, Michelle. Thank you. So I'm going to finish up with this one. So from Manuel, I'm going to read it. I do my best. So where do you believe sports rights holders, broadcasters, will stand in regards to the decrease on global GDP, which might decrease the consumer power to pay for subscriptions? So possible growth in viewership due to the fact that people won't be able to go to the venues, chance to innovation on production and product content delivery. Do we foresee a decrease on the amounts? It's a time where many rights holders are negotiating the next cycles, and broadcasting revenues are responsible for 80% of the overall amount. So yeah, complex question, but the general gist of it I can understand. It's that reduction in what people have in their pockets and how that's going to affect things.
I think in two ways, and it is an interesting question. And I'm sure Manuel, with that question, he probably works in some sort of broadcaster or agency that deals with broadcasters. From one side of the coin, you have people with less money. At the same time, you'll have, because of the empty stadium policy and the social distancing, you'll have more customers or potentially consumers. So maybe, if you think that you can make money out of two ways, you either sell not that many products for expensive price, or you sell for a least expensive price but more products, and you'll reach the same goal in quantity or in quality, right? So I do think that probably broadcasters will lower their prices, their subscription prices, not a lot, but they'll gain so many more customers that are currently not being able to go to the stadiums, that at the end they will probably make up one for the other. I do think there can be a rebuild of the pay-per-view model, which seemed a little bit lost in the last few years. We went from the pay-per-view model in the 90s to a subscription model now. So people now are not actually buying match by match; they're just subscribing to BN or whatever, Canal Plus or whatever, and then they have access to all the packages. I think what may happen is they will go back and say, well, listen, you don't need to subscribe to our channel, but you can individually buy the match of your team that you would normally go and see live. So they'll create other business models, maybe going back a little bit, maybe doing it with an enhanced technology, obviously, in comparison to the 90s. But I think that at the end will probably make up for it. Also, in terms of, if you think about it, in terms of ad sales, if you have from one moment to the other more people buying into the TV coverage, the ad sales price will also go up.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So
I think we can
potential for balancing out. So there's just one last question here, which actually I would like to drop in from Nicola, and it's regarding innovations. And I think this is the context of, we're going forward. What type of innovations have you seen so far to help with the rights holders, sponsors, and even fans with this situation?
So from different perspectives. So for fans, I mean, we've seen all the technology being developed in terms of virtual reality, in terms of immersive reality. So even if you can't be at the stadium, it looks like you are at the stadium the most possible. You put in the screen. at the beginning, it was, I tried a couple of times in Rio, and just after Rio, maybe you did it as well, Christian. It was quite, you came out of it quite dizzy, but the technology is getting much better in that. So Tokyo was supposed to be a landmark for it. Let's hope that Tokyo 2021 will be one as well. In terms of, what was the other question? Was in terms of sponsorship.
So how far, what innovations have been able to help rights holders, sponsors, and the fans? So we covered the fans.
The fans are covered. In terms of the sponsors, what I've been seeing lately is actually they're developing more and more programs together with the rights holders. So imagine that the sponsor would come and say something that didn't happen in the past. The sponsor would come and say, listen, I would like to use your event to launch this new platform or to launch this new product. How can you help me do that? And the rights holders are now being more willing to sit at the table. And again, I think it matches this partnership with purpose that did not happen before, which is the rights holder trying to create packages and programs and ways of activating that are meaningful to their partners and not just a one-size-fits-all. For the last 15 years, we had a one-size-fits-all, which is if you're a tier 1 partner, you get these amount of rights in terms of activation, these amount of tickets, this amount of exposure. Right now, it doesn't matter that much. You will have at the end something that will match your business needs. So I think that will be the key, and I think that's what we're going. And finally, for rights holder, I think it's all of that. It's just being creative with your event. I mean, you've seen that there's so much competition. I mean, you just need to stand out.
Yep. So that creativity is going to have to come to the fore, and I think this is where as an industry, we will prevail, and I think we'll come back even stronger from this. Paulo, I want to say thank you for a fantastic presentation, some great insights,
thank you.
Some great debatable concepts and ideas, and thank you also for all our guests who joined us today. Sorry we ran a little bit over, but it was a great topic and a really good discussion, so I hope that was okay with everybody. As we said earlier, the questions will go out those centers for the ones that we weren't able to get to today. So Paulo, thank you very, very much for joining us. Stay safe, and I say that to everyone as well. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you, Christian. Bye-bye.
See you. Ciao.